Hi everyone, Des Kelly here and welcome along to Lecture 1, Introduction to Alphacam, and this will be the first lecture in the online series for the Advanced Manufacturing Technology module. So in this lecture what we're going to do is have a quick introduction to this portion of the module. We're going to talk about the content, the structure and any of the assessments involved. We are going to have a quick overview of the Alphacam software itself and talk a little bit about the broader world of computer-aided manufacture. We'll talk about the capability of Alphacam, what the software can actually do, and quickly, in fact, we'll talk about it now, getting yourself a student version of the software so you can practice. Now that's a couple of weeks away yet. We're organizing that for you. In a week or so, you're going to get an email from me with a link which you can access a free version of the software. So just click that link, it'll take you to the download for the free version of the software. And we're going to start off today with an exploration of the Alphacam user interface. We're going to try and learn how to navigate our way around the software and how to open files and how to rotate models, and we'll begin with some very simple geometry creation. So in terms of the module itself, as I said a moment ago, it's called Advanced Manufacturing Technology. This slide will provide you a very quick overview of the module, but please access the Learn Online page where you can find the module descriptor, which will give a much more detailed breakdown of the module itself. The module will be shared between Paulini, Sean Tracy and myself, and I'll be taking you for 1 hour per week, and in that hour we'll be introducing you to Alphacam CAM software. This module runs right the way through until summer, and in terms of assessing this portion of the module, will be weighted at 25% of the overall module, and my assessment will involve an end-of-year exam, a computer-based examination, which we'll talk about and give more details about closer to the time. So as you may know at this point, this portion will be almost exclusively delivered online, and each week a video will be recorded and a link will be posted to Learn Online, and a number of accompanying exercises will also be posted. So your responsibility is to watch and engage fully with the videos and the exercises, and when prompted to do so in the video, please upload those exercises, the completed weekly exercises, to Learn Online. And on a needs basis, we'll see how we go as the term progresses. We will hold occasional lab-based tutorials in the computer lab in Letterfrack as we see fit. Here is a plan I've put together for the module, for this 25% of the module. I won't go through it in a lot of detail here, only to say that we're going to spend about 5 or 6 weeks first of all exploring the creation of geometry and the use of Alphacam itself to draw and create geometry and create shapes. After that we'll move on and talk a lot more about the actual machining and the processing of these solids. So I'll also post this as a PDF to Learn Online so you can look at it, and we may not stick to it religiously, but we will use it as a guide to guide the content that we're going to cover in the module. So in terms of the use of CNC, I'm sure you've all had a little bit of exposure, or at the very least you've seen the CNC in operation during your time in Letterfrack. Here's just some of the projects that can be processed and manufactured using the CNC. It's a very versatile piece of equipment when you know how to use it correctly. And part of that, knowing how to use it correctly, involves knowing how to use and program the software behind the machine. The machine itself isn't that useful unless you know how to drive it with the software. And that's what this module is going to do. It's going to introduce you to that. Now moving over to the software itself, the first thing you probably notice is that there's a familiar feel about the software. It's a Windows-based operating system, which means that you still have tabs such as those across the top, which when clicked will highlight a ribbon or will show a ribbon, and within the ribbon there are a number of panels. For instance, if we want to draw some geometry, which we'll do in a moment, we will activate the geometry tab showing the geometry ribbon, and we will use the 2D panel to draw some basic 2D geometry. So rather than just looking at a blank screen, let's just open some sample files. So if you go and highlight and select the open or hit Ctrl+O on your keyboard. Navigate to the tutorial folder, which will be inside the Alphacam, Lycom dir and tutorial file. And within this tutorial file you see a number of different sample files. I'm going to pick the very first one, Alphacam logo engraved, and press open. At least we now have something on the screen to look at. So in terms of navigation and rotating and moving and navigating your way around the screen, to pan left and right, you simply depress the mouse wheel. Those of you with knowledge of Inventor, you'll find that's the exact same command that is used in Inventor. So you depress the mouse button wheel. It's not one of the regular left or right click buttons, it's actually the button integrated into the scroll wheel on the mouse. To rotate, then it's just a regular left click somewhere in the background. You don't use the same system, for instance, as you use in Inventor. You simply click and drag a blank area of the screen, allowing you to rotate it as you see fit. So at any point, if you perhaps zoom really far in or really far out and you can't find your model, if you hold Control and A, that will bring you back. That's the shortcut command for zoom all. That's Control A. Now there are other ways to activate those commands, such as going to View, and you'll see a lot of the rotate tools, zoom all, zoom window, zoom limits, pan are all up there, but I find it a lot easier just to use the mouse commands. In recent years within Alphacam as well, they also have a right click shortcut menu. So a lot of the features that are embedded in the toolbar are also embedded here in that shortcut menu. And it's worth taking a few moments to hover over each of the commands and become familiar with what commands are there and where they are. For instance, if I right click, I can see here there's the reverse view, there's the refresh view, the zoom window, there's the pan tool. They're accessible from there as well. But I certainly think that just using the mouse wheel itself and dragging is the most user-friendly way. So we're now in a 3D environment, which means we can freely rotate this artifact. Sometimes it's a little more convenient for us to look down in plan view or an orthographic view, either at the top, the bottom, the left or the right of the object. Certainly when you're starting to create geometry. What I've done is I've dragged it as close as I can to the plan view, but I can see it's still not perfect. So rather than trying to guess and get it perfectly square on by eye, what you can do is go to the View tab, and then all the different default views will be here. Now the main one we want will be the XY. So if I press XY, it orientates me to a helicopter view looking straight down on top of the panel. If I go to ISO, it will move me to an isometric view, and if I go to a view such as YZ, it looks me in at the edge of the piece. But most of the time we want to deal with XY because that's the equivalent of looking down on top of the bed of the CNC itself. Let's now move it to an ISO view. So go to View and ISO, and you'll notice that there is some geometry. There is the words CAD and CAM as well as the Alphacam logo there in the background. They may be a little hard to see because it's a little cluttered. But what's happened here is that the logo has been drawn and some machining or tool paths, some processing paths have been applied to that geometry. So we'll explore that in more detail as the class goes on, but you'll also notice there's a number of different colored lines. There's green, there's red, there's blue. Each one of those different colored lines or geometries represents something different. For instance, these blue lines represent tool paths, the path along which the cutter or the machine tool will run. What I'd like you to do now is make sure you're in the View tab and go all the way to the right and access Solid Simulation. Not Simulation, be careful not to click that yet, Solid Simulation. And it reverts this back to the original block, the original piece of timber that we plan to start this project with. On the left hand side you can see there's a little play and a stop button as well as some more options we'll explore. If you press play, a blue digital representation of the router cutter comes down and engages with the workpiece. Depending on how this was set up, it may move very slowly or very fast. So what we'll do is we'll use this blue slider bar to speed up the process a little bit. And what happens is, digitally, that blue cutter engages with the workpiece and starts to machine away the timber that's not needed. And that gold colour you see is the timber that has now been exposed as a result of the machining process. This allows you to visually check and recheck and edit the CNC program before ever approaching the machine. You don't have to waste timber with trial and error samples. You can just do all of that trial and error here on the machine itself. So please open up that file and let it run and just watch the cutter as it manufactures the piece. And you can see at this point a different shaped tool has come in to tidy up the edges, and that's the typical efficient way of machining something such as this. You use a large kind of blunt, a crude cutter to remove and bulk away a lot of the rough material first of all, and then you have a second or a third pass with a slightly more delicate, a slightly more fine cutter to get the exact bits and pieces of the manufacturing operation that you want. So there you have it, that's the solid simulation. You'll notice that when I activated the solid simulation, this browser on the left hand side became the solid simulation browser. I can X that, and that leaves me with the operations, and down here you can see the words operations and layers. So if I press operations, operations appears up here. If I press layers, layers appears up here. If I go back and turn on solid simulation appears here, and it also appears down at the bottom in the form of a little tab, and there are a lot of those tabs that you can activate. So just for practice, I want you to X and close all three of those. In that case, this little browser disappears. So to bring that back or to activate any of those tabs that you feel you need, you go to View, and then over on the right hand side, Show Project Manager Page. And that allows you to turn on, for instance, layers. Let's turn on operations, and that's enough for now. Now what do these tabs mean? We'll go to the operations tab first of all, and you'll notice in this case there's op1, which is operations 1, and op2, which is operations 2. I'm going to drag this and make that a little wider. You'll remember a moment ago from the actual 3D machining, the solid simulation, that there were two cutters involved. The first cutter was a large, just flat cutter, and the second one was the red it was the engraver. So over here you can see two operations. The first operation was the contour pocket, as it was called. It was a rough, flat 2mm tool. And the second operation, the second pass, was user engraver 30-degree point end. So every time you apply and use a different tool, you typically have a different operation over here to drive that. And if you start expanding out all the various elements of that operation, for instance, operation number 1 has a number of different geometries, and the associated geometries then have toolpaths. So if you need to edit any particular line or any particular toolpath, you can get in there and edit those individually. Now we'll come back to that in the coming lessons, but for now just know that the procedures and the toolpaths and the geometries that you draw and create in the graphics window are usually logged here in some form or another in the operations browser, and you can edit them from there as well. A lot of the other features we'll explore as we go on. Just at the moment, a few things that jump to mind. I've shown you a few ways now to go to an XY view, an ISO view, such as clicking the icons up on the top left or right clicking and accessing them from there. Another way is to access them via this shortcut toolbar down at the bottom. So you can go to YZ, you can go to XY, and you can go to ISO from this shortcut toolbar as well. So it's now time to start a new document, so we can close this file. You'll notice, unlike other programs such as AutoCAD or Inventor, there isn't actually a little X in this corner to close this. You typically only work on one file at a time. So let's go to File, New, Do you want to save this? I do not want to save this. And it opens up a new file. By default, my computer is set up to open in an isometric view. This little gizmo, as it's called, or a triad it's sometimes called as well, gives me my bearing in space. I can see the X, Y and Z coordinates. I don't really want to draw in 3 dimensions at the moment. I want to move to an XY view, so let's do that to begin with. An XY view does 2 things. It allows me to orientate myself so I'm looking down on top of the bed of the CNC, which is the view that the cutter will have. And as soon as I move to an XY view such as that, you'll notice there are coordinates along the Y-axis going up the way on the extreme left of the graphics window, and there's also similar coordinates along the X-axis moving from left to right along the bottom of the graphics window. And if I move and pan around the screen, you'll find that those coordinates will move as well. It's very important that we know exactly where in space we draw our geometry, so those coordinates will be very important. So I want to begin now with the creation of some geometry. I'm going to leave it until the next lecture to actually precisely lay geometry into the correct position using coordinates. For now, it's just important that we understand where to access the line and the arc and the circle commands and so on, and we get a bit of experience drawing with them. We'll begin as you'd think with the line command. So in the geometry tab, press line with a single click. And you'll notice that the mouse cursor changes with this crosshair, which makes it easier for you to sync up with the coordinates on the left and the bottom of the screen. As you move, I also want you to pay attention to the center of the screen at the bottom. The coordinates that your mouse cursor is at will constantly be fed back to you there. So it's very easy to see where approximately you are with the coordinates. And as I said a while ago, I'm not actually going to worry about the coordinates for today. We'll start off with that during the next session. So for now, just to get a feel of how the line command actually works, place a series of clicks. Remember to click and let go rather than clicking and holding. And you can place a series of lines like that. The line is a chain line for the moment, so it will always try and add another line once you terminate the line with a point. Whenever you're finished, either tap escape or right click your mouse to finish the creation of the line. And here you can see the line is green, and that is geometry. Anything on screen that is that green color is tagged as being geometry. There's shapes and lines and arcs and all that sort of stuff that you draw, that you at some point perhaps you might want to run a toolpath along it. But you don't run a toolpath along a geometry as such. You create a toolpath based on this piece of geometry. You'll notice you can't really click any of the lines, unlike other software you may be familiar with. So for instance, if you want to delete one of those lines, you move over not to the geometry tab but to the edit tab. Within the edit tab there's a lot of commands that will allow you to edit, such as trim and copy and mirror. But for now, let's go to the delete command. And you can click the individual components. In this case, we only have one individual component. Although we've drawn these as lots of different individual lines, the line command within Alphacam defaults to a polyline. All of them have been joined together. So click that and then press finish. You'll notice finish is also shortcutted to the escape key. So if I press escape or click this finish, it will ask me if I want to delete that one geometry, which I do, so press OK. Going back to geometry and the line command, I will again draw a few lines, and I will press escape to close the line command. The space bar will open up the last command that was active. So if I tap escape and then space bar, it allows me to open up and redo the command. So I'm just going to draw a few lines of different shapes, sizes, directions, etc. So let's delete those again. Go to edit and delete. And when I go to select individual components, I can select them individually, such as this. Or I can go all. If I select all, everything becomes selected. So I'm going to tap escape and I want to cancel that because I want to show you another way of selecting. With delete still active, you can always just draw a selection window around all the elements you want to delete and then press finish. Do you want to delete all 6 geometries? Press OK. Yes, I do. Let's now go to geometry again and call up the line command. This time we'll pay a little bit more attention to the command bar. The command bar is what's going to allow us to precisely input coordinates to precisely position the lines during the next lecture. So you'll also see that there's a number of other icons to the left of that command bar. So as I start drawing a line, the snaps, the various snaps available to us will be available there. Now this first one is the auto snap, which is pretty good. It will automatically allow us to snap to various things such as the midpoint, the endpoint and intersections. For whatever reason, if you want those turned off while drawing, remember the snaps will not be available unless the line command is active. You could always turn that off, and you can see now the snaps are nowhere to be seen. You've probably noticed those white arrows at this point. Those white arrows are going to be very important to us because they will help us to determine which of these green geometries are useful and can have toolpaths assigned beside them. So if you use the shortcut command Control and G, you can turn those ghost tools on and off. Most of the time we will want them on, but for now let's turn them off with a Control G just so they don't get confusing. We'll now move over to the circle command, and if you press the drop down arrow under the circle command, you'll notice there are a lot of different types of circles. I want you to move to the center and radius option, and as soon as you do that, you'd expect your mouse, I'm trying my best to click and position the center point, you'd expect your mouse to prompt you to click to position the center of the circle, but Alphacam does it slightly differently. Always keep an eye down here on the prompt bar for information that the computer is looking for. In this case, it's looking for the circle radius. So I'm going to put in a radius of 150 and either press enter or OK. And in that case, it creates the circle with that radius, and now it prompts you for the insertion point. So I'm going to click and position it right there. And you'll notice the command is still active. It still has the circle command active. It's preloaded it already with the circle radius of 150. So I'll just press OK again and drop in another. Or press enter and drop in another. So pressing enter very quickly allows you to drop in a number of those circles. For instance, if I now want a 250 radius circle, press enter, I can drop that in as well. So while we're here, I just want to show you that you can also put in a circle with a center and diameter. This time, let's say a 500 diameter. You can also do this, which is a center and a point, which probably is a lot more familiar to us. This is the way, by default, we put a circle in using AutoCAD and Inventor, allowing you to just click and drag in the circle. You can see by default, Alphacam likes it a lot more when you're specific about the exact point that you insert a line or a rectangle or a circle into. So try to get into the habit of positioning them into the right position from the get-go. At any time to escape a command, you can tap the escape key, or you can press the OK button to close the command. Sometimes you may have to tap escape twice depending on the command that you're in. We'll now move on to rectangle. So clicking rectangle prompts you to either enter the coordinates of the first and second corners of the rectangle, or to simply position the rectangle with 2 clicks. Let's backtrack a little and have a go with the arc command. There's a number of different arcs. This is the 3-point arc, which is the start, second and end points. So if you click that, you can have a click 1, a click 2 and a click 3 to position the 3 points of the arc as you desire. Let's try a couple of different arcs. This is an arc start point, the arc end point, and now down here I need the radius. So let's say 300, enter. It puts in the arc radius 300 between those 2 points. Now up until this point, we've just been drawing green geometry, and we've just been drawing random shapes so we could get our bearings with the lines and the arcs and the rectangles. And we will move on to more precise geometry later, but for today, let's go down the route of exploring the different types of lines. As I said a while ago, these green lines and circles and arcs are geometries. Let's now hit this icon, construction. When I turn on the construction option, anything I draw from now onwards, such as this line, will come in as a different colour. In this case, it's that purple colour. Even if I draw a rectangle and a circle, as long as that construction option is turned on, the shapes and anything I draw will be not geometries but constructions. And keep that in mind, because if you've got a particularly complicated drawing that you need to produce, it's often very useful to lay down some construction lines first and then put your geometries on top of it. Geometries are seen as slightly more important in the eyes of Alphacam. For instance, later when we try to put on tools and machining paths and tool paths, we will not be able to run a tool path along the construction. We certainly will be able to run a tool path along the geometry. Moving over to the layers, I can see there are a number of layers listed here. One is geometry, one is construction, one is toolpath, one is dimensions. We haven't talked about some of those yet, but we have now got some geometry and some construction. So if I deselect the tick box beside construction, the construction disappears. Digging a little deeper, if I press this arrow and expand it beside construction, I can see they are all the construction elements within my drawing, and I can turn any one of those off. For instance, construction number 3 in my case is this rectangle because it's highlighted in blue. If I deselect it, it becomes invisible, it disappears from the drawing. If I expand construction 3, I can see that construction 3, that rectangle, is made up of 4 individual elements. So you can see I can burrow right the way down to every single element of the drawing using this layers button as well. There's no need to do it just yet, but I could actually reorder the various geometries and construction lines that I've inserted there. That's important later when we want the toolpath to come in a particular efficient order. You can reorder the geometries and indeed the constructions. Now we've yet to talk about special geometries, and we'll just explore this for a moment today. The Special Geometries tab is where you can access such things as the hexagon, the ellipse, a bolt hole circle, involutes, slots, splines, all sorts of useful features that are a little more advanced than the square, circle, rectangle and so on. I just wanted to explain what that was because it's the only one in this line that I haven't discussed yet. I'm now going to turn off construction. It's something I always forget to do, so I'll just quickly turn that off right now. And while I'm here, I'll just also say that when I have the line command active, you can also, instead of using the snaps button down here to turn it on and off, they've recently added another larger button over here. And if you find that the line is snapping onto stuff you don't want it to snap onto, such as midpoints or endpoints, or it's not snapping onto something, you can always press the drop down arrow here and select what it does or does not snap onto. Let's now clean the sheet, so I'm going to go to Edit, Delete, and rather than clicking everything, I'm simply going to go to All and then Finish and press OK to delete everything. And a simple Control A will zoom me back to a nice blank screen. And just before we finish up this video, I want to take a bit of time to explore the different commands and functions and features that are available in the software. I know we're at the beginning of our journey through Alphacam, but it's very useful to just look at some of the terminology and some of the wording of a lot of the commands, so at least then you might have a better idea of what it can actually do. So the Geometry tab, first of all, is where we go to create geometry. We've already had experience with the basic geometry, but up to and including the very complicated splines, some text and some parametric sketches, that's where you go to add geometry and add shapes to the interface. Usually if you want to edit any of these geometries in some way, you go to the Edit tab, and the only reason for activating the Edit tab is when you already have something to edit. So in our case, because I asked you to delete everything, There's nothing there to edit, so pretty much all of these edit commands are grayed out at the moment. So anytime you want to change something in any way at all in the graphics window, you typically go to the Edit tab. The View tab then usually involves changing your view or changing the visual or display style of the interface. Work planes we're going to use when we move on to some slightly more advanced modeling. Work planes are similar to those in other software such as Inventor. They allow you to draw and basically move away from the 2D drawings into 3D drawings. And that leads nicely on to 3D drawings. You can create some quite complicated models here within Alphacam. I'll also show you how to import complex models from Inventor into Alphacam, but perhaps you won't have access to Inventor and you may need to include them from, create them here within Alphacam itself. The CAD tab then can be used to create actual working drawings here within Alphacam. Machine is where we will go to process and apply things such as toolpaths and pockets to actually take our geometries and turn those into machinable components. So anytime we need to actually apply a cutter or edit a cutter, we'll get in there to the Machine tab. Nesting is where we go to efficiently nest or interlock various components into a single sheet or into a single piece of timber, so we don't waste timber with our machining. Solid model extract and solid model utilities will allow us to take an existing solid model and have Alphacam learn the geometry of that model to allow it to easily machine it for us. They're very good tools in there to shortcut the whole drawing a model in Inventor, bringing it in here and automatically recognizing the model to have it machined straight away. Constraints are like your parameters. It's a way to have the model behave intelligently, and for instance, if you want certain rules built in, not quite as advanced as some of the code-based parameters that you've been exposed to in other modules, but still you can force lines to be horizontal, to be equal, to be tangential, and that's very, very handy. So the tasks I want you to complete this week are as follows. Please make sure you enroll in Learn Online as soon as possible. That will make sure you have access to all the course materials, as well as make sure that you get all the emails. Please also make sure you watch the video in full and draw along with it. I know we haven't completed the most complex exercises this week, but it's still very important that you're able to complete those. And as such, I want you to take at least 20 minutes during the week to practice navigating the Alphacam user interface. Make sure you're very confident with using the simple commands such as rectangle, square, line, arc, and so on, and that you can seamlessly move between the various views such as isometric and the XY and the XZ. Next week we're going to draw some more precise geometry using coordinates. So today we were just drawing in basic geometry. Next week we'll be a little bit more precise in our use of the geometry within Alphacam. So thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you then.